I want to welcome you to the Play Sheet Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Jackson, and we're going to recap a lot of the Week 2 action this week, talk about some of the storylines that emerged from Week 2, and what we're keeping our eye on early in the season. Afterwards, we're going to go ahead and preview Week 3, talk about some of the hot matchups and some of the games that you might want to get out and see. Let's get to it.
For the past 4 decades, Princeton Healthcare Center has provided a quality experience for countless families to give them a warm and safe senior living environment. We're much more than a nursing home, offering skilled nursing services in a long-term care community. If you're looking for a skilled nursing facility that is as compassionate as it is comprehensive, look no further. Contact us today to schedule a tour for you or your loved one. Princeton Healthcare Center, a commitment to caring.
I want to welcome you back to the Play Sheet Sports Podcast. And like I said in the intro, we're going to talk about a lot of the Week 2 action. There were some fun games and some fun storylines that emerged from that. I personally had the chance to go out to Bluefield at Princeton, good to take a look at the two Mercer County teams and see where they stack up. Was more of the same there, but we're going to dive into that one first and break that down. So since that's the one I'm a little bit most familiar with. Again, Bluefield at Princeton, this game started. It was scoreless there in the first quarter. And then it picked up a little bit. It was 20-6 at halftime. Princeton scored first after a couple turnovers. Bluefield answered them, couldn't get the PAT. Then the Tigers were able to pour it on in the third quarter. It really got out of hand. Final score 51-6. And my takeaway from this game is I don't think Bluefield is as bad as the score let on. I thought there were some plays there to be had, and I broke this down on the videos on my Facebook page and just kind of breaking down the schematic, differences that Princeton was able to make, what they're able to do to make Bluefield uncomfortable. But again, like I've talked about last week, this is a young Beavers team. They're going to grow from this. But I was just really impressed. I didn't think the moment was too big for them. I thought they fought really hard, which was something that I think had been missing last year. I thought that, Princeton got up early and it just looked like they never belonged in that game. And again, I don't want to dismiss the fact that Princeton kind of bailed them out a little bit by turning the ball over. There were a couple fumbles and an interception. But just for them to hang around, I thought really that there were plays there to be had. They just didn't make them. And really on Princeton's side, I want to talk about their game plans. I thought they did a great job of executing it and coming in with an idea of what they wanted to do. And for me, that started with what they wanted to do on defense. They loaded the box, they blitzed, they made Bluefield beat them as a passing team. And Bluefield's capable of doing that. But you're also putting a lot on the shoulders of a young sophomore quarterback. We've talked about it. Max Simpson, Bluefield's quarterback, is a really good player, but he's also really young. He's seeing a lot of things for the first time. He's trying to find his answers as quickly as possible. And Princeton's undergoing some different things. They switched from a 4-man front to a 3-man front this offseason. So what that allows them to do is they can bring pressure from a lot of different spots, and they brought pressure from everywhere in this matchup. Simpson was constantly blitzed. I honestly probably should have charted this, but I didn't on my watch back through. But it felt like Princeton was blitzing on almost every snap. There were very few snaps where they didn't send at least 5, and it gave Bluefield a lot of issues. They were trying to find their answers, and a lot of time that was a go ball deep, and they just weren't able to connect on it. And there were times where they had quick routes to beat it, but the throw got rushed or was behind. Overall, it just wasn't a great execution game from Bluefield, and I got to give a lot of credit to Princeton for making them uncomfortable. Sometimes the execution is because of what you guys do throughout the game to make them not trust their answers or to make them kind of play a little bit faster than what they want to. And I thought at times that's exactly what happened to Bluefield. But Princeton, we'll talk about this later, up to 2-0 now for the second year in a row. Defense looks really good, giving up 6.5 points per game. I'll be curious. My takeaway from this, I really want to see if this is what Princeton's identity is on defense. Are they going to be a blitz-heavy team, or was this game plan specific? On the offensive side of the ball, no real surprise what they did. They were able to get the ball to Brad Mosser in the second half and let him do his thing, and he did a great job at that. I believe he finished with over 188 yards receiving, which was a career high for him. Ended up winning our Player of the Week award. With the rushing yards, he finished with 220 total from scrimmage. I think he had a nice little punt return as well. Sorry, not kickoff return. But yeah, just a great showing from their offense. I am curious to see as the season goes on, because I think teams are really looking to take Mosser out of the game, and that's what Bluefield had done a decent job of, held them to 44 yards in the first half. Are we going to see more brackets? And when Princeton's matchup this week comes up and later on in the show, I think that's really going to be a key point of emphasis, is exactly how does Oak Hill elect to defend Brad Mosser. So to me, that's, I don't think that there was too much surprising from Princeton's offense. Chance Barker got banged up a little bit with his ankle. So Nate Tanner talked about it after the game, but they have to cut out a lot of the running game. They weren't able to do they skimmed the playbook, as he said, because they want to factor in quarterback runs. They want to, make him a force multiplier in a sense. You're not just guarding, 6 or 7 in the box, probably more so 6 because they spread it out. But now the quarterback's a factor in the run game, and that really changes the math. And with Barker's ankle a little bit banged up, I'm sure he'll be ready to go this week, but how effective he'll be remains to be seen. But I think that pretty much everything I expected to see from Princeton's offense, I did see. Wyatt Klein had a nice touchdown. Alex Cox, would be remiss if I didn't mention his 2 interceptions and how well he played the ball. This goes back to what Princeton did on defense. I felt like they really trusted their guys to make plays. And that's a very difficult thing to do, because when you're out there blitzing, these cornerbacks are on an island. And Alex Cox, I thought, made great plays. I think they charted him for 3 pass breakups and 2 interceptions. So again, Princeton, pretty much what I expected. Bluefield, I don't think they're as bad as the score indicates, and I really do still think they're going to be a contender in Double-A as long as they learn from this. It's easy to kind of let these things sort of steamroll, but I still think they have the talent to be a contender in that classification. Moving on to our second game of week that I kind of want to really hit on is James Monroe at Shady Spring. And this one was a 26-7 game, I believe. 7 points that Shady scored came on a pick six. So really, James Monroe's defense handed it to them, just shut them down. They weren't able to get anything going. Now, I know that Snodgrass didn't play in this game for Shady Spring, and he was our leading rusher. I think he had 160 yards on week 1. So that clearly makes a difference. But, credit to James Monroe, because this is a big win. And I talked about this a little bit last week. But one of the things that was plaguing James Monroe coming into the season, from my perspective, is I didn't know if there would be enough wins on that schedule to get into the playoffs, because it's very difficult. Each week you're fighting for something to try and get in. And I think it's extremely difficult with who they have left on the schedule. Still got Tug Valley, Bluefield this week, Greenbrier East, but they're getting these points. You get AAA points from beating Shady. I think Williamstown's going to get you some points as well in Double-A. So just a great start. But again, seems like James Monroe's defense is kind of, holding serve with what they had the last couple of years, where they've been really good. They've had good defensive game plans. So just a great job with what they've been able to do. And it's really kind of cool to see that, because, again, I think I admitted this last week, but I was, looking at the people that they had to replace. I was like, man, I don't know what this season's going to look like. And so far, it looks bright. So as long as they can stay healthy, and that's always the issue when you have smaller numbers as they do, as long as they can stay healthy, I like their chances to continue climbing in Double-A and contend. And again, we'll get into their week 2 matchup, because it's going to be a pretty significant one in the part of our second half of our podcast today. But it really is. It's a nice start for James Monroe. They're 2-0. A year ago, I believe they started 0-2. I think they lost their opener, and I think they lost to Shady Spring as well. So just a nice little. Yes, they did lose their opener. They lost to Wheeling Central. So just a nice little turnaround. And obviously they turned around last year, made the playoffs, and gave Independence a good half of football. But it's nice for them to maybe be able to build on this and not get behind the 8 ball early, and pick up some wins that are really going to help them when it comes to playoff seeding and standings and staying in that picture. As for Shady, I think that's tough. This is one of the issues when you're replacing so many kids. You're having trouble with the secondary. And I've mentioned this before, they've lost 15 interceptions. That's extremely difficult to replace with turnovers, and turnovers from year to year aren't a reliable statistic. It's hard to rely on 15 interceptions. If you went through the area, I don't know how many teams that you could say had 15 interceptions as a team, much less getting it from 2 players. And those players also played receiver as well. So I think they're having some growing pains breaking that in. I mentioned, again, Snodgrass in play. So maybe you learn from this if you're Shady. You've got another key game coming up. And again, we'll talk about that later in the podcast. But a great win for James Monroe. And this is really a good week for teams to get great wins. And we'll talk about this next one in Greenbrier East at Beckley. Greenbrier East is in a very similar position to James Monroe, just in Class AAA. They have a difficult schedule. Still on their schedule right now is Princeton and Nitro. And those are 2 teams that a lot of people consider to be top 5 in AAA right now. And that's where Greenbrier East wants to be. That's where they want to prove that they are with the kids that they have. But man, like for Greenbrier East to go into Beckley, this is their second straight win against a Quad A team. That's going to add up when it comes to point totals come playoff time and to help them get in. So I think Beckley's still going to get them some wins. I don't know too much about Riverside, but I imagine there's probably some wins on their schedule as well. So there are points to be had there, but that's a nice 2-0 start for Greenbrier East just because of what you're going to get in the playoff standing. And I think they won 3 games a year ago. So one more win, they've already tied that. And again, the schedule's not easy. But for this game, it was tied 14-14. Nate Suttle gets the 101-yard interception return, and that's a tough pill for Beckley to swallow because I think it was on the 3rd and 11 play. But if you don't throw the interception, maybe you can trot somebody out there. Maybe you can go for it on 4th down if you want to, or maybe you can kick a field goal and then you still go up and you don't give them the touchdown the other way. It's just a tough swing. That's at least a 10-point swing. I would assume Beckley has a field goal kicker that they like. It's a very difficult spot to be in. And Greenbrier tacks on another touchdown late. They win 28-14, come out of there. For me, one of the big stories of this game and really this season early on is Greenbrier's emergence of a running game. AJ Godfrey, I think that's lifted the weight off of the shoulders of this offense because last year it was predominantly carried by what they were doing in the passing attack, and they had a running back that had some explosiveness to him. And I have to give the offensive line some credit for this too because they struggled last year in pass protection. It seems like being able to get them going downhill is helping them a lot too. Godfrey had another 100-yard game, and it's alleviating some of that pressure off Brody Hamrick's shoulders as a quarterback. Again, I've talked about this. He was a 1,400-yard passer 2 years ago, 1,100 yards or 1,200 yards last year in 8 games. So he has the ability to light it up on the scoreboard in the box score, but they don't necessarily need that from him. And this is really helping lighten that load. I think it's helping the other players as well. But just kudos to Greenbrier East and for Beckley. This is a tough loss to take to a AAA team. That's the life of a Quad A now, where you're trying to balance. We don't want to travel all over the state for Quad A's, but we need to get some AAA games in against some local opponents. But this is a tough one. They have playoff aspirations. And I think this is one that they really need to get because the back end of their schedule is extremely difficult. It's pretty much the same as it has been, but it doesn't make it any less difficult. But yeah, for Beckley, you kind of go back to the drawing board. It's a tough game. They threw 3 interceptions. They're still going through some growing pains, I think, a little bit. Gage Price is just a junior quarterback. So they have dynamic players. It's just kind of getting away from that turnover bug. If they don't, I mentioned it. If you don't throw the interception, you probably go up 17-14. Maybe it's a different ball game. Greenbrier East has to march down the field in order to score instead of getting it like that. So I think there's things to clean up there. But my biggest takeaway is just how improved Greenbrier East is because last year they got shut out in this game for the first time, I believe, in almost 30 years. And it's extremely difficult to just digest. First off, it's your rival. And the way their offensive line looked in that game, they struggled. They were giving up a lot of pressure on Hamrick. And this year was just different. So, yeah, I really impressed with Greenbrier East running attack and just how they've been able to balance their offense a little bit more. I think it's going to help them down the road. And I'm curious to see how much further they move up in that AAA playoff picture. That should be fun to watch. I want to move on to what I think is our last really intriguing story of week 2 and just this early part of the season before we get into break. And that's Midland Trail. Midland Trail is 2-0. And last year they started 0-2. It's such a flip-flop. The same opponents, they kind of got dunked on by both Clay County and Poca last year. And I don't know how many kids those teams have graduated. But the narrative's completely flipped. They've gone in. They were able to win these first 2 games, and you can kind of feel that they're getting a lot more. They're feeling a lot better about it. Xander Uten has 6 sacks already on the year. They're able to run the ball a little bit more. It's such a positive start. And Class AA, I think, is a very competitive playoff picture. So you need to get these wins wherever you can. And I think whenever you're able to turn it around like this, it does something for the kids. I shared kind of a graphic on PlaySheet Sports Facebook page earlier, just about how different they are. As far as points per game that they're giving up, I think they're only giving up 6.5 points per game right now, and they're scoring almost 48 points per game. So they've turned things around, and it's fun to watch, and it's good for that community there. I'm interested to see if they can carry it in. But yeah, that should be fun. That's a good start for Midland Trail. It's probably one of the good stories. Uh, and again, it's not like they've been a bad program. They've been a really steady, good program over the last 5 to 7 or 8 years. But it's hard to kind of come back sometimes from a season like last year when they expected such big things with the seniors they had. Weren't able to do it, but now it seems to be clicking a little bit to start this year. And I know I mentioned that was the last storyline, but the other one, Pikeview is now 2-0. They pull out an overtime win against Liberty, and I think I said last week by mistake that this factors into the AA picture, and it doesn't because Pikeview is AAA. I keep forgetting about that because I feel like they probably should be in AA with their enrollment. But I do want to just kind of hit on the Panthers. This is a nice positive start for them. They've beaten 2 AA, so it's not going to help them too much in the playoff aspiration picture. But I think just more so what they're looking for is to just build some confidence in the program, learn how to win. And I feel like Friday was a big step towards learning how to win. They lead that game. It goes into overtime. Peyton Nance ends up scoring the decisive touchdown. They believe it. I believe they win it, 38-30. That's just a game where you're on the road, gut check. You got to learn how to win. And that was kind of a growing up moment for them. I don't know how much their success translates throughout the rest of the season, but this is just a good confidence booster because even if you flip it from a year ago, they lost these games. They lost to Summers County. It was tough, and now they have confidence. You can tell that the community feels a little bit more uplifted. There's a lot of confidence and excitement around the program, and I'll be curious to see exactly how far they can parlay it. I'd like to see them keep having success. And on the other side of that, Liberty, that's a tough pill to swallow. You're now until you've lost to a good Dodgers County team. You lost to Pikeview, which was a good chance for you to get AAA points. Because next week you have a single A game, and we'll talk about that a little bit. It's good. I think it's good from a competitive standpoint, but as far as playoff and points, it might hurt you a little bit. But I know this isn't the start that they wanted. They were looking for, I think, to really knock on that door to be in a similar position of what Midland Trail is right now. To be walking into a spot for the playoffs in AA and contending for it. And it's a rough start. Now, again, the season isn't 1 and 2 weeks. I go back to James and Rowe. They started 0-2. Bluefield, I think, has started 0-2 the last 4 or 5 years. This is the first time they've actually started 1-1. So it's not uncommon for teams to start like that and then to be able to finish. But for Liberty, your margin for error really doesn't exist anymore. And I'd be curious to see how much they learned from this game, what they're able to apply moving forward. But we're going to go ahead and kick it to a break. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the week 3 matchups that have caught our eye, including our games of the week.
Most people don't realize that your health starts with your mouth and your teeth. Raynell Medical Center is pleased to offer dental care in 2 locations. Dr. Heather Heister is serving patients in our Raynell Dental Center, located just behind the Health Center. Dr. Darren Wadsworth and Dr. Dustin Yoakum are serving patients in the Maxwellton Dental Center. Our dental staff does a wonderful job of making patients feel comfortable. If you've not had a dental checkup within 6 months, make your appointment today.
Back here on the Play Sheet Sports Podcast, brought to you in part by Raynell Medical Center. Excellent healthcare right at home. Make sure to check them out, especially if you are in the Fayette and Greenbrier County areas. They do a great job, and they're a supporter of local athletics. You'll go around to all your different football, baseball, softball fields, and you'll see Raynell Medical Center signs around. So very supportive of local athletes, local athletics and the coverage that they get, and also supportive of what we do here at Play Sheet Sports. Couldn't do it without them. But getting back to the content, which is what you guys probably hear for a little bit more, I'm going to start off with, speaking of Raynell and Fayette County and where signs are, Oak Hill at Princeton. Those folks from Fayette County are going to make their way down to Mercer County this Friday for a duel in Honeycutt Stadium. And we've talked about it before, but this is a matchup of former Princeton defensive coordinator Devon Marion. He was there from, I think, 2017 to 2022. I think 2022 was his last year there. And in 2023, he took over at Oak Hill. Successful program. He's made the playoffs in AAA the last 2 years, hosted a home playoff game and won one last year. So he's done a really good job with that program. And now he'll get to come back to what was kind of his old stomping grounds as a defensive coordinator where he cut his teeth as a coach. And I expect a really good game. Oak Hill's offense, I think that they've gone a little bit. They've been a little bit back and forth. Against Nicholas County, they struggled to put up a ton of points. Although week one, it's really hard to, especially that game. It's hard to take a lot away from that game. But Oak Hill was able to bounce back last week. They're a 2-0. I say bounce back like they didn't win. They won that game. They're 2-0 after beating Riverside last week. They put up over 30 points. But yeah, I'm interested to see, going back to what I talked about with Bluefield and Princeton, what Oak Hill's answers are and whether or not Princeton's identity as a defense is, bring heavy pressure, leave our guys in one-on-one coverage and make you beat us. Because I think if that's the case, Oak Hill has some seasoned athletes. Talk about Carson Treadway, Owen Gross. They have guys that, not only are they explosive, but they're good downfield ball winners if you put them in those one-on-one situations. And they've already proven that this year. I think Carson Treadway, you go back to week one against Nicholas County, I think he ended up catching what ended up being the game-winning 40-yard touchdown pass. And, it was a one-on-one coverage. It was a tough catch. So if they put these guys in these one-on-one situations, I'm curious to see how Princeton's defense holds up, and if Oak Hill's guys can make the plays against that. And also, if you're Oak Hill, can you recognize and diagnose those defensive plays? Because Oak Hill, they're very senior heavy. They have, I think, 4 seniors back on the offensive line. They have those skill players that are veterans in season. But the quarterback, while he is a senior, this is his first year as a starter on varsity. He didn't play last year. Played JV 2 years ago, but Luke Endicott seems to be performing pretty well. This will be my first look at him in person, and I'm just kind of curious. I think this is really going to be a good chess match in a lot of ways. Offensively, what are Oak Hill's answers to the blitz if that is what Princeton decides to do? And then on the other side of the ball, Devon Marion, I've credited him with some of the best defensive game plans I've seen at the high school level. He just has a good way of taking your best player out of the game or limiting them. And I think Princeton's in the position where, it's not like it was the last 2 years where you had a trio of first team All Staters. In 2023, you had, Dom Collins, Brad Mosser, and Markel Lowe, who could just absolutely kill you. They could all go for 100 yards easy, and nobody would bat an eye or be surprised. And last year, you had Daniel Jennings and Mosser and Markel Lowe. Now this year, it's just Mosser as the lone returning All Stater. Princeton's kind of shuffling around its running back room, even though they seem to have found something in Jake Belcher and what he brings. Runs hard, really good utility player. Wyatt Klein's been steady, but I wonder if Oak Hill is going to try and bracket Mosser, try and take him away and make those other guys beat them one-on-one. That's kind of the defensive game plan that I'm most curious to see. I really, to me, that's going to be the most exciting matchup. Is if they're able to limit Brad Mosser and take him away. What do these other guys do, and is that viable? And I think a lot of teams, because Princeton's in contention for the AAA state title, a lot of teams are going to want to look back at this film and see what Devon does, because I think it's pretty well known at this point that he does a good job with defensive game plans and what he wants to do. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to this one. That and how effective is Chance Barker? It's really hard to get those ankles to heal quickly. Is your playbook still sliced in half? Are you able to run as much in the passing game as you want? What does the offense look if he's dinged up and he's limited this week in what he can do? And I'm just really excited to get my first look at Oak Hill to see what they look like in person, and Princeton to see if this is what their identity is, or if they're just kind of a more multiple team. Should be a lot of fun. I'm going to move on to our other game of the week, and that's Bluefield at James Monroe. This is going to be a matchup of 2 top 10 teams in Metro News' AA power poll. Bluefield 1-1. Obviously, they played a very difficult schedule. They beat Graham at home, lost to Princeton. James Monroe has the win over Williamstown on a neutral field, and then at Shady Springs. So this will be the home opener for the Mavericks. Again, I think this will be an interesting game. I think James Monroe is probably going to try to load the box and see if they can get away with some of the things that Princeton did. Take away the run, make them beat you as a passer. And I think the matchup of the week, the individual matchup of the week to me, is Pax Calhoun, Bluefield wide receiver, against Caden Hines, James Monroe defensive back. 2 great athletes, two 6'2", 6'3" athletes going at it. Caden is an athletic freak. He had a nice interception last week against Shady Spring. Pax, I think, has emerged as one of the best wide receivers in AA through the first 2 weeks, has a ton of talent. This is one of the matchups that you circle, early on. You're like, man, this is. I really want to see how this one-on-one goes. But even outside of that, how is James Monroe able to defend Bluefield's other weapons in the past game if they end up getting pass heavy? Kylie Simon, he's going a little bit under the radar, but he's also had kind of a nice little season so far. 2 touchdown grabs. I think he's kind of become Simpson's second favorite target. Jordan has had a nice little breakout game. He had about 3 catches for 60 yards last week. But yeah, I think the defensive strategy in this one, and for James Monroe, what does it look like on offense? Or is it run heavy again? Jaden Miller emerged last week against Shady Spring, had a nice game, 2 rushing touchdowns. I think he averaged about 10 yards a carry. He had a receiving touchdown as well. They do a good job of spreading the ball around. Ryan Mann will touch it a lot at quarterback, whether it be in the running game or the passing game. Talked about Hines, Brock Parker. That's a guy that I have not talked about as much, but he's such a huge part of that team, both on offense and defense. And now Miller seems to have emerged as a weapon for them. So they have guys that they can distribute the ball to. They're not nearly one-dimensional, and they've done a really good job through the first couple of weeks. I think they're rushing for over 200 yards a game. So I think this will be a nice little test. And James Rose won the last 2 games. I know Bluefield came out of the game last year not feeling the best about how that one went. They felt like they should have won that game, and they felt like they blew it at the end. So this will be interesting, and it'll shape the picture of Class AA in the playoffs. And if you're James Monroe, you can sneak this one out and move to 3-0. That's huge. And if you're Bluefield, being able to get to 2-1 is nice heading into. I believe they have Beckley next week, which is another big matchup. So yeah, I'm really curious to see how this one unfolds. Again, watch that individual matchup if we end up getting into time. I think that's going to be one of the matchups of the season between Hines and Pax Calhoun. And if you want to do something on the side, look for something. See how effectively Bluefield runs the ball, if they're able to get lighter boxes and find ways to manipulate that. But we're going to go ahead and take our last break. When we come back, we'll talk about some more week 3 games, and we're going to head and wrap up.
Some see sports as just a game. But it's more than that. It's about building dreams, embracing teamwork, and pushing limits. With every play, every cheer, we're there rooting as partners in their journey. Because at First Community Bank, we believe the youth of today shape our communities tomorrow.
Well, welcome you back to the Play Sheet Sports Podcast. I want to thank our sponsors of today. One of them is First Community Bank. Get your head in the game with free checking. You can go ahead and sign up for a free checking account. They have branch locations in Linside and Beaver and all throughout Mercer County and more. So make sure to stop by if you're looking at opening a bank account. They have various options for you. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up, talking about some of our last couple of week 3 matchups. And for me, the first is Nicholas County at Shady Spring. Now, I had this game in my top 10 games of the year preview to start, but with the way that the season has started for both teams, I kind of moved it out early on. That's why it's not in my game of the week. I think that it could still be very competitive, but I think with the current track and what we've seen of both teams so far, I just felt comfortable dropping it from game of the week consideration. But again, these games between these two teams are always kind of crazy. For Nicholas County, I don't want to call it a must-win in week 3, but I think it is a must-win. You're 0-2 to start. Now, you've played Oak Hill, Quad A, and you've played Chapmanville. So you've lost some tough games. But going 0-3 is almost a death sentence in AAA, which is where Nicholas County is. And if you're Shady Spring, you want to try to avoid going 0 try to go 1-2 to start the year. For Nicholas County, obviously you're going to see a steady dose, I believe, of Devin Nash in this one. That's basically their bell cow back. Has been 1,000-yard rusher a year ago, and they've not done anything to change that this year. I think Colton Helms is, statistically he's throwing the ball a little bit better than what he did. I thought he was a little bit more, he avoided turnovers the sophomore year. Last year there were a lot of turnovers. I think there were almost as many interceptions as there were touchdowns. This year he seems to have found a little bit more efficiency. So in the passing game, I think that Nicholas County is a little bit more set up for success there. Didn't see any Spencer Kuiper in the box score. Now for Shady Spring, I don't know the state of Blake Snodgrass, whether or not he'll be back this week, but if you can't get him back, that's huge. He's a good player. Like I said, he rushed for 160 yards in that first week. And I think that Shady obviously missed him this past week against James Monroe. It's tough to lose a player like that, even though they had another kid that rushed for I think 140 yards against St. Albans as well. But it's the more good players you have out there, the better. And a lot of these kids also play two ways, which impacts the sort of the domino effect of how you operate and what you're able to do, and moving kids around. But yeah, again, I hate calling this a must win, but I think if you're Nicholas County, especially, this is a must win game. You're coming down to Shady Spring. I believe that this one's in Shady Spring again this year. But yeah, I think if you're the Grizzlies, yeah, you got to come in here and make your statement, because again, getting in AAA is going to be extremely difficult, just as it is in AA. There are a lot of teams trying to sneak in on the back end, and if you're going to do it, it's got to start now. And I want to move over to Greenbrier West and Liberty. Now, this is an interesting one. I didn't realize this until Mike Goddard posted about it, but Greenbrier West and Liberty have never played in football, which seems kind of crazy to me. Greenbrier West was in AA up until, I believe, 2013 or so, 2012, 2013. And they never played. Liberty never played them. And Liberty, I believe, was a consistent playoff team at least. I'm kind of surprised that those two teams never got in schedule with each other. But from what I understand, this seems to be the first time these two teams are meeting. For Greenbrier West, they're 1-1. They got the win over Summers County, which is a nice AA points win. Lost to Rome in week 1. So they're kind of stacking up. That's 3 straight AAs to open the season for them. So they've got a chance to really stack some points here. Now, Liberty's in another situation. I talked about this earlier in the podcast. They have to win. I think they're in a must win. If you have any hope of making the playoffs, you have to win this game. You can't lose to single A and hurt your playoff seeding and points and possibility anymore. And you're already behind the 8 ball there. So for Greenbrier West, this is a great opportunity to steal some, because I really don't think Liberty is as bad as 0-2. They have the talent there. They have some returning veterans. I think a lot is there for them to have success. So yeah, it's just a matter of putting it all together. And you go back to last week, you lose in overtime, coin flip. Man, it's tough for Liberty. You've got to find the way to pull this one out. But again, going back to Greenbrier West, they were able to, they spread the ball out a little bit more, and I don't know how much of that was attributed to being a blowout against Summers County, but they were able to spread it out. Colton Dunbar had a good game. He threw the ball a little bit more. I think he had 3 total touchdowns, 2 passing, 1 rushing. But for Liberty, Jackson Workman, I think, had 4 rushing touchdowns last week. So for Greenbrier West, the game plan is going to start with trying to find a way to defend the run and stop Workman. They have a good little rushing combo between him and Isaac Williams. Williams was a good running back last year. So Greenbrier West, I think they have their hands full with this one. I actually think it'll be a very good game. I don't know exactly how it transpires, but I think it has the potential to be one of the games of the week. Now, whether or not it turns out like that remains to be seen. Greenbrier West is also dealing with this is the kind of the issue with single A, is sometimes you go through some injuries and they have some things going on behind the scenes as well. So just overcoming that, which I think they've done a good job in week 2 of bouncing back and kind of steadying the ship. But yeah, this one, I think it should be a sneaky fun one. I've not heard a lot of people actually talk about this game, but I think that anybody that goes out there should get a competitive game. And I don't hate talking about the playoffs this early on, but you talk about the hypotheticals and what this means and what that means. And I think that Greenbrier West and Liberty is a pretty meaningful game when it comes to the playoffs. But I kind of want to wrap this thing up. Go on to our player of the week. Hit on it earlier, but Brad Mosser is our Lewis Nissan player of the week. Brad had 220 yards of total offense, as to be expected. Our guest picker actually chose him as well. And what's funny is I think that he had the lowest vote total of anybody. So, might have to end up throwing the voters a bone a little bit. I don't like to give out pity votes or anything like that. I I always try to vote who I think had the best performance, and I try to adjust that for competition. But gotta start rewarding these guys that they're getting their communities to vote for them a little bit more. Because Gage Price, Landon Clower, those guys have had a ton of vote turnouts, and I think over the first 2 weeks, their Player of the Week awards have went to the players that may have gotten the smallest vote turnout total. So yeah, I guess other notes: Independence is 2-0. That's a good team. They'll end up playing another team from Ohio. Like I said, they're an honorary OVAC team. They looked good last week against Martins Ferry. Really good, complete offensive effort. Ran the ball well, threw the ball well. A couple of explosives, got all their receivers involved. Yeah, but I don't think anybody else really stands out outside of that. I think we hit on about everything. But once again, I want to thank you guys for tuning in today, and also want to thank our sponsors: Raynell Medical Center, First Community Bank, and Princeton Healthcare Center. Without them, we could not do this, and also all of our other sponsors. But those are the ones that invest heavily into this podcast. But again, I want to thank them. I want to thank you for tuning in. We'll be back with you next week to recap all the week 3 action and go over week 4.